So I took these notes on Brandon Snead's forthcoming biography of Lincoln Riley called Sooner, the making of a football coach, Lincoln Riley's rise from West Texas to the University of Oklahoma. Decent reads, very good. It's quick, goes in depth. You could tell that Brandon had gone to not just Norman, but Greenville and East Carolina, or North Carolina, which is where East Carolina is located. Come on, RJ. And then Muleshoe, Texas, as well as Lubbock, and talked extensively with the folks that helped shape Riley's career. And what I get is a lot of this is drawn together, and I'm kind of encyclopedic about OU football, and particularly the Lincoln Riley era, kind of obsessed with it, but it basically lays bare for me. This could only happen once, and it could only happen to this guy. Riley still today does not actually want to acknowledge that he has a photographic memory. But it's one of those things that you know when you see and you have or you don't have. LeBron James has a photographic memory. And if he feels like writing your column for you in a post-game press conference, he will do that. He will describe the situation. He will describe how he saw the floor. He will do that really great inside baseball journalism that we really love and get you a bird's eye view from actual birds, right? Pat Mahomes is also a superhuman in this way. And then there's Riley, for which you're familiar with the parlor game that they play on his coach's show, where one of the analysts lobs him a play or a down and distance, a time, and says, what was the play run? And he can tell you, right? Because he just doesn't forget that kind of stuff. And yet, even for a man that has that sort of intellect, the way that he came to the job at Oklahoma could only happen once. This is a man in high school coming out of Muleshoe who was accused of cheating on the test by his teachers and was made to take the test in front of her. It's also a man that would recite parts of novels that perhaps nobody else would have memorized, because he just remembered, didn't take a whole bunch of notes. He loved playing football. He wanted to be a quarterback. And if he did not dislocate his shoulder in a scrimmage, probably looking at a dude that does have all the goods to at least make an attempt at the NFL, because there's some tape out there of Riley before his shoulder injury where he's got a pretty strong arm. And one of the things that occurred to me as I was reading this book is I've never actually seen Lincoln Riley throw a football. And to make that plain, I've seen Bob Stoops throw a football. I've seen Mike Leach throw a football. I've seen Jim Harbaugh. I can't not see Jim Harbaugh throwing a football. Anytime there's a ball, he wants to take it and he wants to throw it. And he wants to throw it hard, right? Never seen Riley with a football. And that makes more sense because his throwing shoulder is the one that hurts. And even in this scene where you could see Riley going through drills with the wide receivers acting as defense back, some of the guys put their hands on him and he'd be grabbing his shoulder. Right? It's a lingering issue and it's a lingering injury, but it also shapes how he views the world. Ends up picking Texas Tech, even though he's a University of Texas legacy. Both his parents went to the University of Texas. And he picked Texas Tech not because of the football, but because of the football. And what I mean by that is Tech wasn't very good. It's about 70 miles from where he grew up. But Mike Leach was there, and he's running an offense nobody had seen before, where they chunked the ball all over the yard. And he wanted to learn that offense, and he wanted to go play in that offense. So he walks on as a quarterback. Dana Holgerson, Sonny Dykes go to Mike Leach and say, hey, look, man, you can't let this kid keep playing quarterback. I know you like him, but our receivers hate him. The ball never gets there. It never finds them. They know that they're never going to get the ball, and when they know they're never going to get the ball, we can't breed any competition. You can't let this kid keep playing quarterback. So Leach goes to Riley and says, hey, these couple of these dudes I got to keep because they're on scholarship, and I only get one walk-on quarterback, and it ain't going to be you. But I got this other job where I think you could be my personal assistant, and you have an opportunity to be where I am, do what I do, and learn how to do this. And Riley set his jaw. And the only time I could think of how this might have gone would have been in the Big 12 Media Days last year. Barry Trammell says to Riley, you know, you're going through to a third quarterback. Perhaps it's Jalen Hurts, be his first year. Do you expect the offense to take a dip? And then Riley sets his jaw, straightens himself. We don't expect the offense to take a dip. For which I thought was awesome and really great. So I can understand how Leach would look at his and say, what do you mean you got to think about it? I got to think about it. So he takes a 6-7 hour drive to contemplate his future and see if this is something he wants to do. Talks with his girlfriend, Caitlin, about it. Yes, woman that he would marry and who would have both of his girls. And he dives into being Mike Leach's personal assistant, a job that many men would have jumped at and would have loved to have for nothing, especially at 19. And not only does he learn the job, he learns that he can challenge Leach, that Leach wants him to challenge him. He wants him to bring his ideas to the table. And Leach saw in Lincoln a very rare football man. Very smart, was not tied to tradition, would do what he asked, but would also say, okay, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this better. I'm going to come back with better results. And he goes from there to being one of the youngest assistant coaches in all of college football at 23, being awarded an inside receiver's job at Texas Tech. And I love that Riley was in the booth with Dana Holgorsen charting plays as Dana would call out down distance formation for Leach, who would call plays. And immediately my head goes to 2019, Oklahoma versus Houston. Riley refuses to put out a depth chart, puts out the googly my eyes emoji in place of the depth chart. Dana Holgorsen's pissed about it, says, fine, I'm not putting out a depth chart either. Not like I don't know what he does. Not like I don't know who he's got. And you can see the gamesmanship on display. Because you also need to remember in there, Dana Holgorsen is one of the reasons that Lincoln Riley's dream got snuffed out. Because he and Dykes both went to Leach and said, hey, don't let this kid play quarterback, which was Riley's dream. But if that hadn't happened, he doesn't get in that position to be the personal assistant. He doesn't get in that position to be an inside receivers coach. And when Craig James makes stuff hit the fan, he does not become the call for interim offensive coordinator as Ruffin McNeil becomes the interim head coach at Texas Tech. They put on a good showing. They get the job at East Carolina, and he begins to develop. I also need to add in here, I should have been I should have been a grad assistant football coach, man. Look, you go from making nothing to making a little bit of six figures. And I say a little bit of six figures, but that's a big jump, man. You go from making nothing to $100,000 a year, $100,000 plus as a position coach at Texas Tech. And then you go to East Carolina where you make $276,000 as the offensive coordinator. And then you go to the University of Oklahoma where you make $904,000 as the offensive coordinator. And then you get a raise. And then Tom Herman leaves the job at Houston. You're getting courted for the job by Hunter. You're a check to take. And you get the triumvirate of Bob Stoops, David Bourne, and Joe Castiglione on the phone saying, all right, tell us what the offer is. Let us take care of this. Let us ensure that you're going to have opportunities. And then a few months after that, Bob Stoops looks Lincoln Riley dead in the eye and says, you're the head coach now. Watching how that is gone has been so fascinating and rewarding as a college football fan. And reading this book has made that even more rewarding because, one, I know I'm doing a good job because there's only a little bit of this that I didn't know, but I'm sure there's a bunch of it that a lot of people don't know because they're just not as psycho about learning this stuff as I am, and I get that. But I was really interested to talk with Snead about his project, and I can't wait for you to hear that. Shane Carden was not a guy he knew about. He inherited Dominique Davis as a transfer from Boston College, turned out to be great. Won his first game on his birthday on a Hail Mary. Significant. Draws out the luck portion of this. Then Dana Holgorsen calls him up, says, hey, look, there's this kid at Houston Episcopal. He can play a little bit of football. I think he can help you. I already got a quarterback. Not highly rated, but here's the film. Lincoln saw him and immediately wanted him, and he chose to come there, in part because Ruffin McNeil wrapped his arm around him and said, I'm your second daddy now, right? And he said it in a good way, right? Which is to say you can depend on me, which has been Ruffin's way the whole time. He's a good man. And then he goes from that, right, to a situation in Oklahoma where Trevor Knight, you still think might be good. Sugar Bowl Trevor Knight lives, right? You also have this kid, Baker Mayfield, and this kid, Cody Thomas. Cody Thomas is the guy everybody expects to be the prototypical quarterback. You put him in an offense where he gets to throw the ball instead of running his own read, probably going to be a little bit better. And he's enormous, right? And we all know Cody Thomas to be Perhaps the next great big leaguer coming through the Tulsa Drillers organization after he decided to quit football and just go play pro baseball, which was the move. Okay. You give Baker Mayfield on luck. You get Baker Mayfield because Cliff Kingsbury decided that he was going to have it out with this kid, and this kid was not going to win. Then Baker Mayfield becomes one of the singular stories in college football. Then you're able to luck into Jalen Hurts, who is, again, one of the singular stories in college football. He has been 36-6 in his first 3 years as a head coach. He has never not won the Big 12 championship. He has made 4 college football playoff appearances in 5 years. And the one that he didn't, they won a Sugar Bowl against Auburn. What's he going to do when the bottom falls out? Urban Meyer and Mike Leach also spoke to this point. Both of those men know what it means to not be very good at some point in their career. And what they end up doing is chasing perfection. And that's not good. You want to be good, but you don't want to chase perfection. On the other hand, Leach does what Leach wants to do. And Leach is very comfortable being Leach. Urban needed to win. And he needed to win national championships. Riley is on the precipice of winning a national championship. But what if this is not the year that things go the way that they normally go, where you win, let's say, 10 games and you lose one in this abbreviated season, right? Where you make the Big 12 championship game and win it, but you get a loss along the way. Or what happens if you have your first bad season? And by bad, let's think of Bob Stoops going 8-5, right? Because one of the criticisms of my generation is y'all don't know suffering as OU fans, okay? We lived through Howard Schnellenberger and John Blake. And I'm like, well, y'all didn't live through that much, right? I mean, Gary Gibbs' team was good. They just weren't good enough for you. Schnellenberger, all right, still went, 5-5-1. And then, okay, you had a couple of bad years with Blake. And then Bob came in and did what he did. Tell me about going through Gomer Jones, okay? Going through the 60s. You went through the 60s, cool. You know pain. I get that. But that's also one of the reasons why Lincoln Riley's getting paid $6.6 million. And why he's going to make close to 7 is just make sure that you never feel that. And I thought that the end of this story as it's written today is wild and interesting. And I also think that, it would speak volumes that we want to talk about Lincoln Riley in the way that we want to talk about Sean McVay. And I get why neither one of those dudes actually want to be acknowledged like that. Those are dudes that look at Belichick, they look at Bill Walsh, they look at Lavelle Edwards, they look at Sid Gilman, they look at some of the luminaries of Vince Lombardi of the sport and say, I'm not there. Well, of course you're not there. But you're someplace that nobody else has been either, and you have to acknowledge that.